place that you are and the place that you think you should be are two completely separate things that you can't even view on the same plane of existence without discrediting yourself. And you need to understand, before I even delve into what I mean by that crypticness, you can't possibly believe the way that I see it unless you follow a particular set of givens. And the first given is that you believe in God. Okay, now I'm not saying you do or do have to believe a certain way, but I'm saying for any of the things that I have to say in this video to matter or be significant to you, you have to believe in God. You have to believe that there is a God that cares about you, a God that created the universe, and a God that created you. Next, you have to believe that there are multiple layers and levels to God and to His reality. You have to believe in a spirit or a soul, whatever you want to call them. You have to believe that there's a difference between your body and your mind and your spirit. Your spirit or your soul is not the same as your mind, and your mind is not the same as your body. They are all separate things that are all connected to each other. But if you don't believe that, if you don't believe there's anything other than just the one individual person, then you can leave this video. Not because I don't value you as a person, but because nothing that I have to say will benefit you in any way. Or maybe it will. But you have to be open to this idea. This idea that there's more to you and to life than just this one individual thing or this one experience on earth, which is the final given, is that there is something before and beyond this life. That this body is temporary, but what's in the body is not. The energy. Which you should, whether you believe in God or not. Nothing comes from nothing. All energy is not created. It is distributed and redistributed. This is a basic fact of life, of science and physics. Energy is shared. Energy comes from somewhere and goes to somewhere. The question is where? Where does the energy of the life force come from and go? Because we can assume, if you believe in all these things, that there are layers to God and reality, that God does exist, and that there is something before and after life. We can't assume that this is it. We can't assume that this is where everything's at. People say, where do you go when you die? That's assuming that here is the place that you started. Instead, the best way to frame it, in my opinion, would be to assume that there is something before and after, and it is the same or a similar state of being before this life. And when you're in that state, you go, where do you go when you live? Where do you go when you live as a mortal, temporarily? That would be a better thing to say. Because we don't know what all the options are. As of right now, we know it's Earth. But were we conscious of that until we learned about it on Earth? No. What if it was Mars? What if it was Saturn? It's obviously not, but we wouldn't have known about it until we did on the planet. So we can assume that life is where it's at here. We're here where it's at to live temporarily, but that doesn't mean it's where it's at. It means it's a step, a blip in infinity. So what's the point? What's the point of all that compared to everything? Because if you have these basic principles in this particular view, then you can understand in your body, mind, and soul, there is a level for each part of your journey, for each aspect. So where you are at currently, you view on the plane of your body. Because your body does the physical things that are measurable. You can measure time that it took to do something. You can measure that by looking at the thing. You can look at the thing. Is it done yet? No. That means there's more time that needs to be put on it. How much? We don't know, but there's more. You can measure it by the fact that it's there to begin with. You've taken time to put it there. Even if it's not done, there must have been some amount of time to put into it. It's measurable if you watch it. It's measurable if you have ways to look at the time. You can measure something in its size and its progress. Therefore, if we're measuring progress as to where you are versus the abstract concept of where you should be, you measure where you are in the physical. And you have to understand, if you believe in God and you believe in these different layers of reality, then most likely you believe that the human body is limited because it's mortal and God is not. And you also believe that at some point humanity fell. And in that fall, that made the body limited. Every time you fall, it is a microcosm of the fall in the garden. Or whatever any of the other stories are. Does that mean you should judge yourself? No. It means when you're viewing progress as to where you are and what you've done to work to where you are, you have to understand that you must give yourself the benefit of the doubt and the grace that your body is limited. Your physical body and how that affects your emotions and how that affects your actions are limited. Is that an excuse to do stupid things or to be mediocre or be a failure? No. But does that mean if you fail that you are a failure? Yes, if you don't get back up and if you don't choose. But you have the choice. You can make the choice to get back up. You can be on a 300-day streak of NoFap. And suddenly you have an urge and you go and you watch the filthiest and most disgusting thing on the internet. And I'm not talking mud or dirty jobs. You can either hate yourself for the decision you made or realize in a moment of weakness you chose weakness. Admit it, accept it, and move on and choose strength and restart your streak. You can do the same if you're going to the gym and you broke your streak. Where you are is measured physically and therefore must be given a level of grace for weakness because your body will always be weak. Weaker than your mind and weaker than your soul. So then on that level, where does the mind come in? The mind is the observer. This is the problem. We think that our mind is the biggest tool in our body for progress. And in a way it is, because it is the way that we observe and perceive situations around us. When you look at the things that are measurable, you take that information into your mind, and then you think and you analyze, and you come to a conclusion. But the problem is, when we overvalue our mind, because our brain will overvalue itself, it's narcissistic at its core, we're going to overthink and overanalyze, thinking that we're doing something smart and something good, and it's going to separate. It's going to create a disconnect between the body and the mind. You're going to live in your mind like it's your body, and your body's just going to do things in its weakness. If you feel impulsive, if you feel like you really have no control over yourself, how much time are you spending in your head? How much time are you spending not doing the things you should be doing, not having the perspective you should be having, and not taking action instead of just thinking? The mind is meant to observe and take action based on the information it takes in, and your body is meant to be the vessel for that action. The body is weak. The mind is not meant to be strong or weak in that sense. Now, your emotions you can train to be weak or strong. But in this particular sense, the mind is meant to observe. and be the bridge between the body and the soul. And the soul is intangible as well. And the body and the mind, it's on a different plane than the body. The body is where you observe where you are. The mind is how you observe where you are. And the soul is where you should be. Because again, if we're talking about different levels of reality and God and the fall, at one point, I truly believe our body, mind, and soul were all merged together as one thing. Because made in the image of God, we were made to be like God. It said so in the beginning of the Bible. And in that way, we would be, in a sense, 3 in 1. Body, mind, and soul. And the only way you can put those together is in a way that is in the image of God as light, because we can't see, we can't perceive in this form what it means to look at God. So the best thing we can put to words is light, pure energy, because that is what God is pure energy. And at one point we were a form of pure energy. Now we're not, because we have been tainted. But the Spirit, the energy of the Spirit, is the closest thing to God that a human can ever attain, is engaging in that spirit and soul that does connect to God. Now, that doesn't mean we should get all high and mighty and think that we are God. It means that we have something that connects us back to our roots. And that something never forgot what it was like to be in the garden. That soul is pure energy of God. God has a spirit. The Spirit of God has been given to us since the time of the New Testament. And when you interact with that Spirit, through your soul, it is a transmission of divine energy. And the divine energies never forget each other. But the body is tainted. And it is the vessel that contains the mind, even though the mind is on a different plane. It's the chains that hold your mind. So while your soul never forgot, your body and your mind did. So when you're talking about where you should be versus where you are, you're backwards. Because this isn't a journey of discovery and of improvement. This is a journey of rediscovery and remembering. You improve by remembering what your soul never forgot. That is the journey. When it says we are being refined like metal in a fire, what I believe that means is we have been given a grace and mercy by God to experience this life and its trials and hardships, because that refinery is the fire, the soul spiritual fire, that when we walk out and when we die, we have been given the opportunity to remind our spirits and our souls where we came from. Through the acceptance of God and the acceptance of Christ and the acceptance of all of these things, and the belief that there is something greater and that there is something that you should work to attain. Then we are given the privilege of returning to the light and returning to the energy. Waking up. So when you look at where you are versus where you think you should be, you can't view them on the same plane, and you discredit yourself by beating yourself up for not being where you should be. Because ultimately where you should be is something you can't attain until you're dead. The mindset you should have is, I am not where I should be, so I should work every day to build up, to do better. Because if I do that every day until I die, I will never be the thing that I want to be. I will never be the thing that I should be. But I will be allowed the chance to look back on my life. When the time of judgment comes, and when the time of re-entering the place where I came comes, for God to say, you did try. You did work. And you may not have woken up all the way, but you had the initiative and the drive to wake up to reality, to wake up to where you came from, to wake up to who you are. You had the initiative and drive to go, there's something better. There's something that I can choose to be because I was made to be like God. And though I can't be him, I can't be perfect, I can sure strive for greatness because that is what was put in my bones. And when you do that, there will be a reward. Don't settle for complacency, but don't kill yourself for not being God, because that is what you do when you say, I'm not where I should be, and this is bad. Where you are is not ever going to be where you should be. And if you beat yourself up for it, if you tell yourself that you're stupid, that you're a fool, that you have not done enough, and that you can never do enough, well, you can never do enough. Because if you're going to beat yourself up for not being where you think you should be, you're beating yourself up for not being God. How arrogant is that? You do yourself and everyone a disservice when you complain about not being God. And that's what you're doing. That's what you do when you say, I'm not good enough because I'm not where I should be. You are good enough because you're trying to get there in the first place. And there is a reward for that. You can never be God on earth. So don't try to be God on earth. Try to return to what he built you as in the first place.